Pope revealed what happened before the game against Louisville. Did you see it? Let's get to the news. But first, subscribe to the channel and keep receiving more news about the Cats. Mark Pope finally opened up about the supposed episode before the game against Louisville. And contrary to what many imagined, the story wasn't explosive at all. But, curiously, that doesn't make it any less revealing about the current state of Kentucky basketball. On the contrary, it says a lot about the emotional state of a team that is still trying to find balance while carrying the weight of being Kentucky. Pope, a coach who understands better than anyone the pressure of wearing blue. After all, he experienced it as a player, a national champion in 1996, began by recalling something that any minimally passionate fan knows. Losing affects us in a strange way. And when that defeat comes to Louisville, their biggest rival, the emotional impact doubles. It was in this context that the post-game commentary arose about something atypical that had happened behind the scenes before the game started. And of course, in Lexington, it only took a spark for the fans to start imagining heated conversations, fiery speeches, some breach of protocol, any sign of drama. But the truth is much simpler, and at the same time, very significant. Pope explained in Thursday's press conference that the incident was simply a moment when the players wanted to flip the switch earlier than usual. Normally, the 40 minutes of the pre-game meeting serve as a period of serenity, where the team tries to keep the atmosphere calm, control emotions, take a deep breath before plunging into the chaos of the game. But that day, none of that worked. The team entered the locker room with high adrenaline, wanting to accelerate the process. They wanted to go to war immediately. Nothing much. Literally. We just flipped the switch too early, said Pope, almost apologetically for not having a spicier story to offer. I wish there was more drama, something more exciting. But there wasn't. And that's precisely the interesting part. There's no fighting, no rebellion, no structural failure. There's just an emotionally charged team, feeling the weight of classic, and a coach trying to navigate between intensity and control. Pope recognizes that emotional management is vital to what Kentucky does on the court. And if there's anything positive in this story, it's realizing that the coach is fully aware of this. The loss to Louisville affected Pope. It was only 5 minutes of post-game press conference, but the way he spoke, his gaze, his tone, everything indicated that it hit him deeper than he would have liked. And this is reflected in the group. Anyone who watched the following game, the Champions Classic against Michigan State, saw a team still seeking stability, oscillating between moments of raw energy and lapses of disconnection. Perhaps this early switch explains part of it. But there's an encouraging side to Pope's sincerity. He's not hiding the process. He's not masking the team's emotional development. He shows that there's a path, one that isn't perfect, that includes stumbles, but that it's being followed consciously. And for a program that has often been criticized for closing its doors and saying little, Pope brings something new: openness, transparency, a human vision of basketball, where mistakes aren't treated as moral failings, but as stages of maturation. The revelation may not have been groundbreaking, but it reinforces something essential. Kentucky is feeling, is reacting, is searching. It's not an apathetic group. It's a living group. And if there's good news in all of this, it's that teams that feel, teams that truly care, are precisely the ones that grow the most when the pieces finally fall into place. Now that we know what happened, the question is no longer what went wrong in that pre-game, but rather, how will Kentucky transform this raw intensity into consistent performance? If Pope can flip that switch, neither too early nor too late, this team's potential could surprise many. And perhaps in the future, this seemingly minor episode will be remembered as a sign, the moment the team showed that it is indeed ready to respond. Tuesday night was far from ideal for Kentucky basketball. The 83-66 loss to Michigan State in the Champions Classic not only exposed the Wildcats' technical and tactical weaknesses, but also highlighted a disconnect between coach and team. Facing a crowd expecting Kentucky to impose its historical strength, the Wildcats appeared disoriented, insecure, and unable to respond to the opponent's intensity. However, amidst the grim scenario unfolding on the court, something deeper emerged. Mark Pope's self-criticism and his clear willingness to take full responsibility for the situation. Pope, who already carries the pressure of following the footsteps of legends like John Calipari, made it clear after the game that he sees the program's current state as a direct reflection of his own decisions and methods. "My message isn't resonating with the players right now," he said, with a frankness rare in a sport where coaches often seek to deflect blame or point to external factors. Instead, Pope dove headfirst into analyzing the situation, acknowledging that the team is very poorly coached and recognizing that there is still a significant gap between what he expects and what his players have been demonstrating on the court. This stance, while painful, is also a positive sign. It reveals someone who, even in the face of adversity, is willing to confront his own mistakes and work to correct them. The game itself was a stark reflection of this disconnect. Kentucky started well, leading 17-14 at halftime, but quickly lost control of the narrative. A devastating 30-10 run by the Spartans not only sealed the game's fate, but also highlighted the structural flaws Pope mentioned. Kentucky's defense was unable to contain Michigan State's agile and precise offense, which hit 11 three-pointers, an impressive number considering they had only scored 13 in the previous 3 games. Furthermore, rebounding was another critical point. The Wildcats were dominated 42-28, including 10 offensive rebounds allowed. This type of performance reflects much more than the absence of key players like Jalen Lowe and Jaden Quaintance. It's symptomatic of an identity still under construction, and it is precisely at this point that hope lies. Pope didn't make excuses, nor did he try to mask the difficulties under guise of injuries. On the contrary, he was emphatic in stating that if you build an organization the right way, its identity isn't defined by one individual. This long-term vision, although difficult to accept in moments like this, is essential for anyone who wants to shape a lasting and resilient program. The coach knows that Kentucky needs to evolve from a culture based on individual stars to a collective mentality, where each player understands their role and contributes to the group's success. And, however painful it may be to admit momentary failures, this transparency can be the first step in rebuilding something bigger. Michigan State, on the other hand, offered a valuable lesson on the power of continuity and development. Under Tom Izzo's leadership, the Spartans brought back 6 players from the previous roster, including 3 starters. This stability allowed the team to play with palpable chemistry, driven by a mutual trust that only comes with time. Jeremy Fears Jr., for example, had a below-average start but managed to recover brilliantly, dishing out 13 assists, the most for a Michigan State player against a ranked team since Mateen Cleaves in 1999. Jackson Kohler, with his 20 points, was another standout, showing that Izzo's work in retaining and developing talent continues to be a benchmark in college basketball. This stark difference between the two programs serves as an important reminder for Pope and Kentucky. While Michigan State has built a solid foundation over the years, the Wildcats are still in the process of rebuilding. This does not mean, however, that the path chosen by Pope is wrong. On the contrary, his willingness to confront problems head-on and take responsibility for them is an indication that he is committed to genuine transformation. Perhaps more patience is needed than fans would like, but Kentucky's history shows that great changes often begin with a moment of humility. Pope himself seems aware of this. When he said, "We're not going to fail this season," he was sending a clear message. What has happened so far will not be the end of the journey. Let's move forward. The team finds itself in the midst of an identity crisis that, while painful, could be the necessary trigger for a profound and significant transformation. Pope's words during his last press conference resonate as a sincere and direct warning, but also as a call to action for players, fans, and all those who care about the future of this team. When Pope admitted that the team's initial identity had been abruptly ripped away, he wasn't just acknowledging recent losses or technical errors on the court. He was exposing something much deeper. The disconnect between what Kentucky promised to be at the beginning of the season and what it has demonstrated to be on the court. This disconnect is even more cruel because it directly touches the essence of the program. Kentucky basketball has always been synonymous with confidence, controlled arrogance, and a physical and dominant style of play. Now, that identity seems to have been exposed as a farce, shattered by the harsh reality faced against ranked opponents. And, as Pope rightly pointed out, facing this truth can be an incredibly painful and even terrifying process. But why terrifying? Because unlike many teams that can hide behind superficial justifications or minor tactical adjustments, Kentucky is facing a structural abyss. It's not just about correcting bad passes or improving the defense. It's about rebuilding a mentality, a culture, and above all, a confidence that has been profoundly shaken. Pope knows this. He understands that the moment requires more than quick fixes or empty promises. It requires an internal transformation that can only be achieved through hard work, self-criticism, and a willingness to face discomfort. Pope's choice of words during the press conference was particularly revealing. By mentioning that this process can be both terrifying and galvanizing, he outlined two possible paths for the team's future. One path leads to stagnation, to the passive acceptance of mediocrity, and to the definitive loss of what makes Kentucky unique. The other, however, points to a journey of resilience and overcoming adversity, where current suffering serves as fuel for an even stronger rebirth. This duality is at the heart of the sport, and Pope knows this better than anyone. He made it clear that Kentucky's fate depends exclusively on the choices that will be made now. Either you succeed or you don't. Right now, we're not succeeding. This seemingly simple phrase carries enormous weight. It reflects not only the frustration of a coach who sees his team falling short of expectations, but also the urgency of a leader who wants to see his players rise to the challenge. Pope isn't asking for perfection. He's asking for commitment, dedication, and the courage to face discomfort head-on. He knows the process will be long, and that immediate results may not be visible. But he also knows that without this willingness to face the terrifying process, any attempt at recovery is doomed to failure. For BBN, these statements may sound like a hard blow, especially in a season already marked by difficulties. However, there is something profoundly positive and hopeful in Pope's words. He is not avoiding reality or minimizing the problems. On the contrary, he is confronting them directly and transparently, something few coaches have the courage to do. By admitting that the team is lost and that the road back will be arduous, Pope is laying the groundwork for genuine rebuilding. He is telling the players and the fans that this is the starting point, the moment when Kentucky decides whether to surrender to adversity or use this period of crisis to become stronger. Furthermore, Pope is treating his players like adults, holding them accountable for the choices they will make going forward. He is not offering shortcuts or magic solutions. Instead, he is challenging each player to look within themselves and decide if they are willing to pay the price necessary to regain the program's greatness. This approach may seem brutal to some, but that is precisely what makes Pope a visionary leader. He understands that true growth only happens when discomfort is faced honestly and fearlessly. Leave your opinion. It's important.